Good evening, everyone. Tonight we're rolling slowly down a moonlit back road. Windows cracked. That gentle midsummer air carrying the faint perfume of cut grass and gasoline, the old dashboard glowing a soft amber like a nightlight for grown-ups. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I like seeing our little constellation of night owls. Now, turn off the lights, maybe let a fan hum in the background, and let's begin tonight's journey together. Out here, the road is a ribbon of quiet, and every reflective sign blinks once like a polite greeting. The tires hum a friendly vowel. In the rear view, houses glow with soft rectangles of kitchen light. And somewhere, a sprinkler ticks its slow metronome. I'm holding the wheel with 2 fingers, not because I'm careless, but because tonight's story needs a gentle grip. Some objects feel alive after we're gone. Some goodbyes require an engine idling in neutral. I'm Celia, though for years Martin called me co-pilot. The day he brought home the 1995 BMW, deep blue-green and a little smug. Our driveway looked as if it had a secret. He loved modest pleasures. The dignified blink of the turn signal. The engine's soft throat clear at 2,000 RPM. Cloth seats that kept a whisper of his aftershave. After he died. I tucked the car under a tarp like a folded flag and dusted it as if care could suspend time. Evan, our son, asked me to brunch to talk plans. Kira arrived with a binder labeled Salon, lease, equipment, website. It's time, she said, tapping a spreadsheet that promised to behave. If we sell the BMW, I can cover the deposit and 2 months' rent. Walk-ins and social traffic will carry us to steady. Evan added, Mom, it's just sitting. It could help someone. Help us. The fork in my hand clinked against the plate in a careful yes. Bring me conservative projections, I said, and a calendar that doesn't believe in miracles. That afternoon, I took the car around the block because big choices deserve a lap. The engine woke like it had slept in a sweater, then found its old rhythm. Mr. Cho waved from his recycling bins. For 10 minutes the passed and I remembered how to share a breath, and I understood that love and metal can part politely. Sidebar. Quirky fact, glove compartments were invented to hold literal gloves. Early drivers wore them against grease and cold, and the compartment outlived the gloves. A habit that forgot its origin. At the dealership, Dean Harper walked a slow circle around the BMW. A mechanic's patience tucked inside a gentleman's manners. Rare to see one this clean, he said. I stood a little straighter, as if the words were also about how I'd kept the last years from blowing apart. He named a price that felt fair. I negotiated because Martin would have teased me if I didn't, and because bargaining turned surrender into choice. We settled on a number I could say without trembling. Academic phrase of the day, sunk cost fallacy. The public argument that because we've invested years, money, or love into a thing, letting go would waste the past. The past is already paid for. And today asks a new question. In the parking lot, I called Evan and Kira. It's done, I said. Funds will clear in 2 business days. Thank you, Kira said. Brisk but soft. Evan added, I'll come by tonight to help with the garage. Elder wisdom. When people you love ask something big of you, make them show how they'll carry it. Don't hand them the weight until you've seen their grip. At home, I brewed tea and made a list. Cancel plates, transfer title, photograph receipts, call insurance. I keep a toolbox the way some people keep houseplants, mostly decorative, occasionally alive. The ritual of forms steadied my hands. Evan arrived with a pizza. We ate at the oak table where his school projects once glittered the seams. Dad would be proud,
he said. He believed in useful beauty, I answered. We sorted glove box debris, maps with Martin's tiny pencil notes, a cassette labeled Road Songs, Don't Laugh, a peppermint wrapped in lint from a winter drive. I kept the map and the tape. The candy went to the brave. Kira texted a ribbon of beige paint swatches captioned Vibes, and for once the word fit. Morning brought a practical sun. At Dean's scarred little desk, a square of wood that has seen more goodbyes than a train station, I signed the title. You sure? He asked. No one ever is, I said. And we shared the smile of people who know how letting go feels in the hands. He folded the paperwork, set the fob on his palm, and I placed the metal key beside it like laying down a ring. On the rideshare home, the driver said his AC has 3 settings: Arctic, Dragon's Breath, and Please, Lord. I said the BMW had 2, Brave and Moody, and we laughed. The kind that lets the day exhale. Back in the garage, I listened to the difference, 1 echo lighter. I swept and found one of Martin's steel washers hiding like a coin from an old country. It went into my pocket. At the dining table, I opened the bank app. Funds pending. I wrote a check to Kira's business account for the agreed amount. No more. Not yet. And tucked it into an envelope labeled Open with a Plan. Near dusk, I walked our old loop. Then reread a note Martin wrote years ago, thanking me for steering when he tired, before bed. The bank updated, cleared. The BMW was gone. The past, honored, the future. Politely knocking. I opened the window, let the fan hum its round syllable, and hoped the car would be driven kindly. Morning arrived clean and quiet, the kind that makes coffee smell like a small promise. I set the envelope on the table, open with a plan, and let it sit there like a polite animal that eats only on schedule. The garage felt bigger without the BMW breathing in it.
Forward, I told myself, but not fast.
At 9, Kira came with a binder and citrus bright perfume. Evan followed with 2 cappuccinos and his careful peacemaker face. We took the usual places at the oak table. Here's the conservative runway, Kira said, sliding a spreadsheet over, voice shiny with effort. The columns were tidy enough to salute, though one cell said TBD by Vibes, which almost made me laugh. Evan squeezed my shoulder. I kept the envelope shut and asked the kind of questions that test whether numbers have bones. Exact square footage? Ventilation? How many chairs to open? Whose name is on month 1's lease? And who, specifically, is the landlord of record? Her smile thinned. She flipped to mood boards, sage paint, brass sconces, frosted glass that whispered hush. Elm Street, she said. We're finalizing. It's a management company. We're in email. All her verbs wore the future tense. A bracelet on her wrist caught the window light and scattered it. I don't keep score on jewelry. I keep track of timing. It's lovely, I said. New? She glanced, startled. Wholesale sample on loan? She said. Marketing. Her laugh had a tinny overtone, like a spoon against a jar. Evan's jaw tightened the way men learn to hold water in their mouths around conflict. Elder wisdom. When money gets near. Language changes costumes. If everything is pending, about to, and finalizing, then nothing is happening yet. Ask for verbs you can see. Signed, paid, delivered, installed. We walked the 3 blocks to Elm. Summer air warm as a folded towel. A bakery sent out buttered applause. The supposed unit had papered windows and a taped flyer. Leased. Tenant fit out underway. That's the other bay, Kira said quickly. Ours is the mirror image on the corner. Same sign vendor. Overzealous. The corner door was locked and dusty. Through a slit. I saw bare studs and a lone tape measure on the floor. While Kira took a call outside. Evan and I split an almond croissant that flaked like good snow. She's nervous, he said. She wants perfect. I touched his wrist. Perfection is a bedtime story we tell fear so fear will nap. Let's ask for the boring parts to be boring. He smiled. You and Dad with your sayings. We collected them, I said. Some stuck.
Quirky fact. Sidebar, the red and white barber pole originally advertised bloodletting. Barbers were also surgeons. Red for blood, white for bandages, the pole for the staff patient's gripped. We tidy up histories until they look like decor.
Back home, I drew a 2-column list, needs versus nice. Chairs, mirrors, sanitation, permits, insurance, I read. Tapping the left. Plants, art, brass, anything. I nodded to the right. Kira's face softened into a brief, unguarded tiredness. And I liked her in that moment. Beginnings exhaust even the hungry. I can stage this, she said. I just need the deposit to secure the unit. I nudged the envelope an inch closer. First third upon a signed lease and dated receipt from the landlord, I said. Then the rest in 2 tranches tied to permits. Her phone lit with a friend's photo, manicured hand, same bracelet, captioned, "We shine or we nap." Kira locked the screen as if tucking in a child. She nodded once, small. Evan looked between us like an umpire at a quiet game. The envelope stayed closed.
Academic phrase of the day. Signaling theory. The public argument that we sometimes buy status-loud things not for their use. But to broadcast competence or success, the message can outrun the truth. And then the truth has to sprint to catch up. That afternoon, I downloaded the city's Salon checklist, the scavenger hunt, whose prize is permission. I texted it to Kira, then opened a document labeled Timeline, Salon, Real Dates. My computer autocorrected Salon to Saloon, which, honestly, might simplify financing, sell peanuts, pour something brown, call it a concept. By evening, Kira's stories bloomed, paint swirl reels, folded towel boomerangs, a wrist flash in a car where sunlight made the stones bounce. Wholesale sample, I told myself, letting skepticism stretch but not stand. I brewed chamomile and watched the neighbor's porch light click on like a thoughtful blink. I wrote what I actually knew. She had a plan. It had soft spots. She glowed. The lease was a rumor. The envelope was a promise on pause. Evan called. She's pushing hard, he said. I told her your conditions are fair. Thank you, I said. I'm not the villain. I'm the guardrail. He laughed. You're the guardrail with baked goods. Then come by, I told him. I'll overbake something on purpose so you can call it rustic. The next morning, a small pebble rolled across the day. Downtown. I saw Kira outside Jalina Jewelers. Velvet bright displays making daylight look expensive. She didn't see me, too busy laughing into her phone. The oval stones at her wrist scattering noon into sequins. Maybe she truly had a loaner. Maybe she was returning it. Maybe the truth was still choosing shoes. I kept walking. Counted to 10 so my better self could arrive before my mouth did. And let the observation join the list instead of the accusation. At home, I put the envelope by the door, trimmed the aloe, and dusted the frame around Martin's photograph. Co-pilot, he liked to say on long, empty roads, tilting the wheel toward my hands as if trust were a small ceremony you repeated until it stayed. The house held the quiet of a held breath. I wasn't hunting for trouble. I was introducing time to temptation and waiting to see which one blinked first. I texted Kira, "Lease copy when you have it, then I'll bring the first third, proud of your courage." She replied with a heart, a sparkles emoji, and a promise of tomorrow. I set an alarm titled Boring Parts and let the fan hum me towards sleep, the envelope patient as a stone. Before sleep found me, I thought, if spreadsheets were people. The cautious ones would wear reflective vests and pack granola bars. I'm fond of those. By mid-morning, the house had that quiet, clean-edged light that makes dust honest.
I was watering the aloe when the phone buzzed with Dean Harper's name. "Miss Reyes?" he said, his voice wearing the same careful courtesy as his shop rags. We pulled the glove box to detail it. There's a false back with a little latch. Inside, well, there's a metal box. It's got your name on it. Looks like the owner meant it for you. I thanked him so many times I started to sound like a broken audiobook. Then changed out of my paint-splattered house shirt, it looked like I'd lost a fight with a pastry bag, and found my keys rattling in my purse like a retired maraca band. The dealership smelled like motor oil and determination. Sun pooled on the concrete in bright rectangles. Dean met me by the service bay and held up a tin the size of a paperback. Matte steel with a strip of masking tape across the lid. In Martin's familiar block letters, for Celia, if the car ever leaves. The handwriting hit me like a gentle hand between my shoulder blades, steadying and urging at once. "We didn't open it," Dean said. "Felt like a boundary." I nodded. Right call. The tin was faintly cool, as if it had been keeping its own weather. We walked to his scarred desk, the same square of wood where I'd signed the title, and he set the box on a clean towel as though it were something with edges that mattered. "How'd you find the compartment?" I asked, trying to keep my voice as even as the fan that ticked above us. "Cabin filter swap," he said. "Your model hides screws like secrets." I reached behind, felt a second latch, and, well, he mimed surprise. "Seen it once before in a collector's car. Most folks never know." Sidebar. Quirky fact, on your dashboard fuel gauge. The tiny triangle next to the gas pump icon points to the side of the car where your fuel door lives. A small kindness from the people who label things for a living. I ran my thumb along the tape's ragged edge, then set my hand flat to feel the weight, not heavy like tools, not light like letters, somewhere in the middle where plans like to settle. My breath slowed into the pace I save for threading needles and choosing words. "You can open it here," Dean offered. "Or not, no pressure." I pictured Kira's binder, the bracelet catching sunlight, the tape flyer on Elm Street that promised more than it explained. The box sat between us like a question I didn't want to answer standing up. "I'll take it home," I said. "Thank you for calling," he smiled. The quick, relieved kind people wear when they've done the right thing and the world claps politely. "Martin was a prepared sort," he said. "He was," I answered, and the past breathed in once, then stepped back, letting the present keep the room. On the counter, a small coffee pot struggled through its second life. I poured a paper cup anyway. It tasted like someone had filtered it through a memory. But warmth is warmth. We did the tiny formalities, initial here, receipt there, and Dean slid the tin into a simple grocery bag as if disguising a goldfish from a child who hadn't earned one yet, outside. Heat stood still. The sky had that busy blue that makes clouds blush to be seen. I carried the box like you carry a sleeping infant, visible and calm. At the crosswalk, I felt my thoughts try to sprint ahead. What if it was only spare bulbs and stubborn pennies? What if it was something that changed how I remembered him? And I tugged gently on the leash. Academic phrase of the day, Bayesian update. The public argument that we begin with a sensible prior and adjust our belief a notch with each new piece of evidence, instead of converting to a brand new religion every time something surprises us. I didn't need a verdict, I needed a small slide of the slider. Click by patient click. The bakery's bell gave a polite ding and everyone inside smelled like sugar and errands. I bought a small loaf because carrying bread steadies the human animal. Plus. The bag made the tin look less like a plot device and more like lunch. The clerk asked how my day was going. "Episodic," I said. She laughed without needing the details. It's a town that understands chapters. At home, I cleared the oak table all the way to wood. The way you do when you're about to grade papers or mend something that matters. I set the tin in the center and the bread to the side. Then put on water for tea. Elder wisdom. When life hands you a sealed envelope with your name on it, literal or metaphorical, create gentle conditions before you open it. Make a small ritual of patience so your fear has time to put its shoes neatly by the door. The kettle sighed. Outside, a lawnmower droned like a distant airplane. Everyone agreed not to board. I thought about calling Evan. I thought about not calling. Grief is funny. It doesn't only belong to the person who lost their spouse. It sprawls. It borrows chairs. It worries its edges in every room. I didn't want to make the tin into a referendum on Kira or on my son's good sense. So I did something ordinary. I sliced bread, buttered it all the way to the corners, and sprinkled salt because my father taught me that salt tells bread it matters. Before I sat, I took a photo of the box, not to send, just to tame the moment into pixels in case the future needed to see how it began. The phone camera caught the grain of tape, the press of Martin's pen where his letters always deepened, M's and R's like little footbridges. I breathed through my nose the way the grief counselor taught us in a church basement with good coffee and bad folding chairs. The box waited. I brought the small lamp closer, warm light pooling like patience. My hands hovered. If I opened it now, the day would tip. If I waited, the day could finish its gentle geometry. 3 light jokes flickered and took their seats. First, that my houseplants were probably hoping it was a watering can inside. Second, that my estate sale soul half expected a stack of those paper coasters Martin pocketed from diners like they were cultural artifacts. Third, that if it were a single spare key to a scooter, I'd have to learn to be the scooter lady on our block, a demographic with a surprisingly loyal fan base. I texted Dean a simple thanks and tucked the receipt into the folder where I keep the other proofs of ordinary duty. Then I wrote a note to myself on an index card. Open tin. After walk. Call Evan, if heart says so. The fan hummed, turning the room into a place where air remembered to move. On the mantel, Martin's photo kept being itself, a man in a windbreaker. Chin tipped up as if listening to the forecast. Evening leaned in softly. I put the loaf in a bag. I set the tin on a folded tea towel as if giving it a small stage. The envelope for Kira stayed by the door, obedient to its stipulations. I watered the aloe again because sometimes redundancy is how you negotiate with worry. Through the window, the street flickered to life. Porch lamps, bicycle bells. Someone testing a smoke alarm for honesty. I didn't mistake the box for magic. It would be what it was. But I also recognized the precise tenderness of Martin's instruction, if the car ever leaves. Not if I died. Not if we fought. Not if you're scared. If the car leaves. He had understood the way objects organize our choices. The way a glove box can become a time capsule if you tuck the right note inside. When the sky finally traded blue for violet, I put the tin in the cabinet where I keep letters, passports, the guest room key that no one ever needs because I never lock that door. Tomorrow, I told it. The way you tell a child you mean it when you promise a morning surprise. Then I turned off the big light, turned on the small one, and let the house take a long, even breath without me narrating over it. I woke before the alarm, the house holding that thin, pearly light that makes edges kind. I set the tin on the oak table and brought my reading glasses, which only have 2 modes, microscope and theater binoculars, and chose the one that lets a heart read slowly. I peeled the tape the way you peel a bandage on a good day, steady, without ceremony that would make it larger than it already felt, inside. A cloth pouch lay folded next to an envelope the color of toast. Martin's block letters walking calmly across the front. Celia, open when ready, not before. I wasn't trying to be brave, I was trying to be honest. I slid a butter knife under the flap.
His handwriting on the first page made my breath catch, the way he wrote his R's like little bridges. The ink slightly heavier where his patience gathered. Co-pilot, it began. If you're reading this, the car has moved to a new story. Good. Things are meant to be used. We are, too. The letter was a practical love note, full of small instructions that didn't crowd, as if he'd left a trail of porch lights. First, he wrote, you'll find a small key in the cloth pouch. It looks like jewelry, but it's for a safe deposit box at First Harbor Bank on Elm Street. Dual control, your key plus theirs. Box under your name. Rental paid for 5 years. Inside are documents and some ballast for hard weather. Use what you need. And forgive me for planning. Second, there's a 1-page list. Call these people only if you want. Miss Pruitt at the credit union, Mr. Ung at the brokerage, and, if you're ever unsure, Raina Holt, who helped me once with a contractor who smiled too much at numbers. She's discreet, and she's kind. Third, if Evan or Kira ask for help, love them. But keep the paper honest. Make money the last thing you give and the first thing you verify. You're better at that than I am. I had to stop there and let the hum of the fan count 10 for me. Beneath the letter was a single typed page. His ballast plan. Simple as a grocery list. Copy this. Sign that. Scan here. Shred there. Wait 2 days. Sleep before deciding. He'd left a copy of a credit union certificate schedule. A note about a modest ladder of bonds in my name, and a small, well-worn passbook from a savings account I'd forgotten because life had gotten loud, tucked beside them. 2 statements for a plain index fund that had been quietly minding its business for years. Martin was not a magician. He was a man who liked boring things that worked. I opened the cloth pouch. The key was short and bright with a hollow stem, not unlike a charm you'd pretend was decorative if anyone asked. Its weight was persuasive without threat. Sidebar. Quirky fact, most safe deposit boxes still use a 2-key dual control system. Your key plus the bank's guard key. Turning together like a handshake, the contents aren't FDIC insured. Which feels counterintuitive until you remember the FDIC insures deposits, not secrets. I read the letter again, this time listening for the places where he'd chosen restraint. He hadn't said, don't trust Evan. He'd said, verify paper. He hadn't said, be afraid. He'd said, sleep before deciding. In the margin of the second page, a smaller note. If I'm wrong about anything, forgive the precaution. If I'm right, forgive the quiet. I could hear him saying it. That soft throat clear he did, before offering a correction to a recipe or a route. And then, in a postscript, there's a map in the glove box. Keep it. The roads change and so will you, but the distances are still the distances. I made tea and put butter on toast all the way to the corners, because details make companionship visible. If there were a snack syllabus, buttered toast would be the required text. Elder wisdom. When a message from the past arrives, resist the urge to solve everything at once. Do the next verifiable step. Then let your nervous system catch up. Large locks are usually a row of small pins aligning 1 click at a time. Evan texted a simple heart and, "How are you?" I typed, reading something from Dad. "I'm okay. We'll call later." And left it there so the conversation could breathe. Kira posted a story of folded towels and sage paint, a caption about manifesting keys, which made me smile despite myself because I had, in fact, just manifested a key by opening a tin with my name on it. Academic phrase of the day. Principal agent problem. The public argument that when one person, the agent, is supposed to act in the best interest of another, the principal. Their incentives can drift. That's why clear agreements and verifiable steps matter more than feelings when money puts on its work boots. I laid out the items the way nurses lay out instruments, each in its lane. No drama, every edge visible. The aloe on the sill looked impressed.
That plan has seen some things. I photographed the letter, then printed a copy for a folder labeled Simple. Because if a future me needed this, she'd be tired. The plan asked me to go to the bank, present ID, open the box, and, here Martin had underlined, leave the bank with only a copy of anything you need that day. Don't become the target that carries the treasure. Be the person who carries a list. He knew my tendency to overpack faith and underpack water. 3 light jokes arrived on their own schedule. First, the tiny safe deposit key made my sofa suddenly look like a suspiciously small bank vault. Second, I realized my signature has not improved since 4th grade. It's just faster. Third, I briefly considered wearing a trench coat to the bank and decided my life was thrilling enough without costume changes. I put the key on a ribbon and wore it for a minute to feel its insistence. Then I tucked it into my pocket, because jewelry that unlocks things deserves denim, not theatrics. I placed Martin's letter back in the envelope, pressed the seam, and slid it into the cabinet with passports and the guest room key no guest has ever needed. The house felt like it had been adjusted by a careful hand. Same picture frame, straighter nail. On a blank card, I wrote tomorrow's mission in 3 lines. 1. First Harbor Bank, Elm Street. 2. Ask for box access, bring copier plan, not a suitcase. 3. Eat lunch after, not before. Nerves confuse hunger with decisions. Then I washed my cup, wiped the table, and let the ordinary reclaim the scene. Outside. A truck sighed into gear, somewhere. A screen door rehearsed its squeak. I sat in the quiet and imagined the small metal drawer sliding out. Felt my shoulder relax at the idea of something solid and boring waiting for me. Something Martin had arranged not to dazzle me, but to spare me from improvising when the world asked me to. I texted Evan. Bank errand in the morning. We'll share what's shareable once I sort it. He sent another heart and a thumbs up, his way of staying near without leaning. Kira tagged the Salon mood board again. I let the post pass like a weather report for a neighborhood I might visit later. When I finally stood, the key made a polite sound in my pocket, as if to say it preferred clear schedules and daylight. Good. So did I. Elm Street wore a business calm morning, delivery trucks sighing at the curb, a bakery lifting warm air into the sidewalk, the bank's glass doors holding the day like 2 level hands. I had the small key in my pocket, the letter folded flat in my bag, and a quiet I'd practiced on purpose. Inside, cool air and carpet that asked everyone to step kindly. The pens were still on their little chains, a reminder that even ink gets ideas about wandering. I told the woman at the desk, her tag said Marisol, that I needed access to my safe deposit box. She nodded the way nurses nod when you say a word that could mean a lot of different things and led me down a short hall to a door with a dial that looked like it had secrets from the 1970s. In the vault room, silence had its own echo. Marisol took out the bank's long ceremonial key, and we did the small choreography, her key, then mine, then the soft slide of metal understanding its job. She set the narrow drawer on a table and stepped back, a respectful radius. My hands stayed steady because I told them to. The lid lifted with the muscle memory of a bread box. On top was another envelope in Martin's hand, Elm Street Vault, open slowly, as if labeling were a way to keep time from rushing. Beneath it, a tidy stack, life insurance policy copies with my name easy to find, a folder of account statements for plain things that do their work without applause, a little cloth roll that clinked in that polite way metal has when it doesn't want to startle anyone. I unrolled it to find 10 gold coins, each in a soft sleeve with a date. Not enough to make a pirate jealous, more than enough to make a rough day less rough. There was also a slim notebook, Martin's block letters neat in the margins, dates, amounts, phone numbers, a map of obligations and belongings that didn't argue with itself.
Marisol brought me a clipboard and a spare note card. "We don't allow photographs back here," she said gently. "But you can make lists, and we can notarize copies at the teller window." I liked her instantly. Some people are born with reassuring eyebrows. I wrote an inventory like a nurse preparing a tray. Policies. 3. Certificates. 2. Index fund statements. 4. Coins. 10. Notebook 1. Letters. 2. In the notebook's first pages, Martin had written out reminders in the tone of someone who believes in boring strength. Keep 2 months' expenses liquid, ladder maturities, sleep better, never co-sign without the person sitting in front of a calendar. If the story shifts, write down the shift. I turned a page and found a section labeled Simple Context. The careful letters announced no gossip, just file clerks of fact, dates of late payments Evan had once mentioned. The title of a card Kira had opened for launch expenses. A note that the management company for Elm had a P.O. box and a registered agent in another state. No accusations, only breadcrumbs. Martin hadn't been surveilling, he'd been noticing. He was a man who kept receipts because paper is a helpful witness when memory gets conversational. Elder wisdom. When you're faced with a drawer of nested decisions, take what steadies and leave what inflames. Copy what proves. Write what questions. And let anything that screams for urgency sit in the quiet corner until it can talk in a normal voice. I asked Marisol for certified copies of the policy summaries and one statement that showed the index fund's account number, nothing more. "The original stay," I said out loud, to hear myself be sensible. She smiled. "Always a good sentence," she replied. We locked the coins back into place because cash has a way of turning regular errands into theater. And I wasn't auditioning today. Still, 3 light jokes tiptoed in. First, the vault made me feel like the world's calmest heist crew of 1, armed only with wheat crackers. Second, those chain pens and I had a moment where I promised not to run if they didn't. Third, the coins chimed like tiny cymbals and I promised them I wasn't starting a band. Tucked in the notebook's back pocket, I found a single-page list of names. Miss Pruitt at the credit union, Mr. Ong at the brokerage, and, written slightly darker, as if he'd paused, then committed, Raina Holt, discreet consultant, helped with contractor dispute, bill paid, respect earned, no phone numbers for Evan or Kira, which told me what it needed to. Talk to professionals first, to family later, to myself always. Academic phrase of the day, moral hazard. The public argument that when people are cushioned from the consequences of risky choices, they tend to take larger risks next time, in families and in finance. The gentlest kindness is sometimes a boundary that lets cause and effect keep speaking to each other. Before I closed the box, I looked once more for anything loud. There wasn't. Just Martin's quiet design. The kind of prudence that doesn't care if you call it boring as long as you call it back when you need it. I signed Marisol's ledger with my 4th grade signature wearing its adult coat, accepted the copies she'd stamped, and walked out into noon as if the sun had been saving my place. Elm Street smelled like sugar and fresh paint. A kid on a scooter showed off for no one in particular. I bought a plain sandwich and took the slow bench. Ate while reading the notes I'd made, underlining only verbs, signed, paid, renewed, lapsed, registered. The P.O. box detail tugged, not like a siren, but like a thread asking politely to be followed. I wrote, "Verify landlord of record. If P.O. box, who's behind it?" Then put the pen down because curiosity also needs lunch. Quirky fact. Sidebar. The ridges on the edges of quarters and dimes, called reading, were invented to stop people from shaving off tiny slivers of precious metal when coins were silver. The grooves told the world if value had been nibbled while no one was looking. On the walk home, I let the key rest in my pocket and let my thoughts use their indoor voices. Kira's bracelet flashed across memory like a thrown coin,
the mood boards, the taped flyer that said leased, the way Evan's jaw learned to hold water. I wasn't building a case, I was building a calendar. Lease copy first, then tranche 1, permits, then tranche 2. All on paper everyone could see while still liking each other. And if the paper argued with the story, I would listen to paper without raising my voice at the people. At my kitchen table, I made a folder labeled Vault, Working Copies, and another labeled Questions, Real Dates. I called Miss Pruitt, left a message that said only what was necessary. I called Mr. Ung. His assistant promised a call back tomorrow. I put Raina Holt's name on a blank card and wrote 3 words beneath it. Boundaries, timeline, witness. Not to spy, but to give the future a couple of chairs so it didn't have to stand and sway. By late afternoon, the house had cooled into that forgiving shade it keeps for people who try to do the next right thing. I set the coins out for one long admiring minute, then returned them to their roll. The way you put a baby back in the bassinet after naming all the ways it looks like your grandparents. I slid the small key back into its pouch, placed the pouch in the cabinet next to passports, and closed the door as if tucking in a thought. On the counter, the envelope for Kira still waited, open with a plan, patient as a stone that believes in tides. I wrote her a short text. Ready to fund the first tranche upon signed lease and landlord receipt. Can meet tomorrow afternoon. She replied with a heart and 2 sparkles. The fan hummed, the room returned to civilian life, and for the first time all day, I let myself sit without a list in my hand. By late morning, the air felt level and useful, the kind of day that makes paperwork behave. Miss Pruitt from the credit union called back. Warm voice with a backbone. Nothing urgent, she began, but we flagged an authorization form that didn't sit right. Someone submitted a request to add an authorized signer to your savings. Signature looks photocopied. I kept my breathing slow. Not me, I said. She walked me through safeguards, freeze on changes without in-person ID, alerts on file, copy of the attempted form to my email. We declined it, she added. Just wanted your eyes on what we saw. When her email arrived, I printed it on the old laser that insists on warming up like a Victorian fainting couch, then held the page under the lamp. The signature was my name, not my hand. The curve of the R in Reyes wore someone else's patience. The authorized signer line read, Kira Albright. The address block tried to move my mailing to a P.O. box, 3 digits that rang a small bell from Elm Street. I didn't circle anything. I dated the margin and wrote 1 sentence. Unauthorized add blocked copy on file. Kira texted an hour later. Lease scan incoming. Deposit timing? The PDF was not a lease. It was a letter of intent on Dovetail Management letterhead, P.O. Box address. No landlord signature. Payment instructions via instant transfer to property ops at... I wrote back, steady as a ruler. Happy to fund first tranche upon countersigned lease with named landlord of record and W-9. Wire only to business account matching W-9. Include unit number, start date, and permit schedule. She replied with 3 sparkle emojis and working on it. Elder wisdom. Keep affection face to face and money on paper. Love breathes easier when commas and dates do their work in black and white. I called the city permits desk. A patient man named Hector let the keyboard do its rainstorm. Corner unit, I said, giving the address. Any permits pulled for Salon build-out? He hummed. Mirror unit has a plumbing permit under a different tenant, he said. Your corner? Nothing filed. Timing is a generous word, I answered, and thanked him like he'd carried a box up my steps. Academic phrase of the day. Hanlon's razor. The public argument that we shouldn't attribute to malice what can be explained by haste. Confusion, or garden variety incompetence. Kindness urges caution, but receipts keep the story honest. I opened a fresh document labeled YMD Timeline and began laying down tracks. Sale of BMW, dealership call, tin discovered, Martin's letter, bank visit, inventory, copies, credit union alert, Kira LOI with missing countersignature. I attached scans and titled them like little librarians: short, clear, no melodrama. My magnifying glass came out for 5 dignified minutes, and I felt like a cardigan detective in a quiet series no one binge watches because the crimes are administrative. Sidebar. Quirky fact: the binder clip was patented in 1910 by Louis Baltzley to help his writer father keep papers together without punching holes. Over a century later, it still holds timelines like good posture. 3 light jokes arrived and set their bags down. First, my scanner squeaked like a mouse giving a TED talk, but it soldiered on. Second, the coins from the vault, tucked away, made me briefly consider a pirate-themed bookkeeping service. The eye patch felt like a tripping hazard. Third, the stapler proved more opinionated than a cat until I gave it a fresh strip. Mr. Eng's assistant returned my call. Set statements to read only for now and route distributions to checking, not to any third party, she said. Sensible, unglamorous. My favorite. She also sent a simple suspicious activity log. I said yes to anything that made the future less dramatic.
Evan rang as the template arrived. "We got an LOI," he said, buoyant, proud of the momentum. I answered, "I'll release funds when the lease is countersigned and the landlord's W-9 matches the wire account." Silence, then a measured. "That's fair," he added, smaller. "Kira says some landlords want deposits before signatures to hold the space. And some fairy tales ask for breadcrumbs before the forest," I said. He laughed, the sound of him still in the room with me, not just in the plan. Hector emailed a follow-up. No record of permits for the corner bay. Mirror Unit's permit belonged to a barber who had pulled his paperwork months ago. My hands did their quiet work: print, hole punch, clip. The paper did not accuse, it arranged. I walked to the credit union to sign the fraud alert form. Ms. Pruitt showed me the attempted authorization packet, my name, an old address, a pasted signature that shimmered wrong at the edges. "We declined and flagged it," she said. "We'll notify if anyone tries again." I thanked her for catching what I didn't even know to look for. Back home. I reviewed Kira's spreadsheet and found 2 zeros that seemed to have wandered off. Plumbing entered as 100 against a quote I'd seen last winter for 12,000. Signage at 450, where the vendor site said 4,500 for illuminated channel letters. I typed, "Typo or optimism? Please clarify." Optimism is a fine vitamin. It just isn't legal tender. I called Raina Holt, the discreet consultant on Martin's list. "I don't want to fight," I said. "I want paper that can stand up without me propping it." "Good," she answered. "Record meetings with consent. For my notes, ask for dates, amounts, and nouns. Let them decorate with adjectives if they like. If there's a P.O. box, follow the registration to a person. And keep your promises small and written." We scheduled tea for tomorrow at 2. Evan texted a minute later. 2 p.m. works. Kay wants to walk through the packet. I pictured the oak table, the envelope labeled "open with a plan," the tiny key sleeping in its pouch. The house felt like a stage before the audience arrives. Quiet, set, lights not yet bright. I added 2 lines to the timeline. City confirms no permits for corner unit, and spreadsheet errors flagged for clarification. Then I slid each page into a clear sleeve for no reason other than dignity. Paper knows when you've respected it. The neighborhood began its evening play, dogs walking their humans, bikes practicing confidence, someone deciding whether to wave. I watered the rosemary and chose calm. When I came back in, the fan resumed its soft syllable and the document waited, neat as a made bed. Before dinner, I stood by the cabinet where the small key slept and thanked the past for sending such an ordinary kind of courage. There's bravery that roars, then there's the kind that files, clips, and dates. I'm partial to the latter. It leaves plenty of room for a good night's sleep.
At 1:50, I set 2 mugs on the oak table, placed my timeline binder where it could be seen without introducing itself, and reset the envelope, open with a plan. I put my phone down and practiced the phrase, for my notes, so it would land as gently as a napkin. The kettle tried a little opera. I thanked it and turned the flame low. At 1:55, the doorbell gave its courteous single bell. Raina Holt arrived first, trim blazer, steady eyes. I'd asked if she would sit in. Nothing sneaky. Just another pair of ears with a good memory. She glanced over the binder, nodded once, and tucked a pen behind her ear. "Keep it conversational," she said. "Dates, addresses, nouns." 2:00 exactly brought Evan and Kira, summer warm and slightly out of breath. "Thanks for seeing us," Evan said. "Before we start," I said, tapping the screen, "I'd like to record, just for my notes so I get the numbers right." The little red dot came on like a shy ladybug. Evan agreed. Kira smiled. I introduced Raina by name and purpose. "I'm prepared to discuss $30,000 beyond the original envelope," I began. "But only if the bones are solid. Signed lease with landlord of record. W9, account name that matches. Permits queued. We can stage in tranches against milestones." I slid a blank sheet across. "Talk me through your timeline, unit number, start date, landlord's name, and the address for rent checks." Kira smoothed her hair like the words lived there. "We're working with Dovetail Management," she said. "The address is the P.O. box on the letterhead. To secure the unit, we need the deposit now. Today would be best, because the other bay is moving fast and the owner is impatient." Evan studied the page as if numbers might appear. "Owner's name?" I asked. "We'll make the check to the person or entity that owns the building." She blinked. "The manager handles it." "Who is the landlord of record?" Raina asked, voice set to room temperature. Kira offered a first name I'd never heard and a last name that sounded like a password someone typed twice. "Mailing address?" I said. "Same P.O. box," she answered. Academic phrase of the day. Information asymmetry. The public argument that when one side knows the names. Dates. And true balances, and the other is guessing. The DIL leans toward the knower. Contracts lend the guessing side a backbone. I wrote the name exactly as spoken. "And permits?" I asked. "Filed," she said quickly. "Under the corner unit?" "Yes." I let a small silence sit down. "The city told me this morning there are no permits for the corner," I said. Kira adjusted her bracelet as if it needed coaching. "The contractor might have used the mirror unit as a template," she said. Evan looked up, a word half-shaped, then closed it. "Elder wisdom. When a story and the calendar disagree, don't argue with the story. Ask the calendar to speak louder. Write down exactly what it says, and let the signatures catch up to the sentences." Sidebar. Quirky fact. A carpentry dovetail is a joint shaped like a bird's tail, wide at the end so it can't pull back through. It holds without nails only when the cuts fit honestly. A pretty dovetail with sloppy angles is decorative failure. "I'm also curious about a form the credit union declined," I said, keeping my voice in the lullaby register. "Someone tried to add Kira as an authorized signer on my savings and move my mail to a P.O. box. The same 3 digits on Dovetail's letter. That request wasn't me." Weather moved across Evan's face. No storm, just a front. Kira's smile stayed, working harder now. "Must be a clerical mix-up," she said. "We've been filling out so many forms." "Possible," I said. "So let's anchor to nouns." "Amount you hope to transfer today and to which account name?" Raina asked. 30 to property ops, Kira said. "We can text instructions." "I prefer wires to named accounts after counter signatures," I answered. "Today we can sign an agreement that I'll fund tranche 1 upon receipt of the executed lease and W9. If those arrive by noon tomorrow, I'll wire at 3. Evan nodded. That's reasonable, he said. We moved through chairs, plumbing, insurance. Each time I asked for a noun, Kira gave me an adjective. Premium chairs, she said. Expedited permits. Responsive landlord. We'll need the names, I said, and the permit numbers. She jotted bullets that looked like promises written from far away. Reina asked for the contractor's license. We have 2 options, Kira said. Which one is licensed? They're both very experienced, she said. The ladybug light on my phone blinked, patient as a metronome. I slid the envelope a few inches. This still waits, I said. I want this to work the boring way that keeps families liking each other. I'm ready to sign a funding plan today with clear milestones. I'm not ready to move money toward a P.O. box. Evan rubbed his eyebrow, a gesture from homework years when the answer wasn't on the first try. Kira, he said carefully, do we have the landlord's W-9? We can request it, she said. Do that, I answered. And the lease will list the unit number and start date. Kira stood to leave, then sat, then reached for her phone. I can get property ops on the line, she said. Let's, I said, and pressed speaker. A cheerful loop arrived from a faraway room. After 4 measures, she hung up. They're off today, she said. We scheduled specifics instead. Countersigned lease and W-9 by noon tomorrow. Permit application receipt. Contractor license. Upon receipt, wire at 3. Everyone repeated the list so the room could memorize it. The lemon slice in Kira's mug drifted to the rim like it was trying to eavesdrop, then slid back in politely. We stood. Evan hugged me a beat too long and I let him. Sometimes a hug is the only sentence people can finish. Kira shook Reina's hand, then mine. We'll get it, she said. And for a moment I believed the part of her that wants a real thing more than the glitter of almost. The door closed softly. The house exhaled. I saved the recording and named it 2025 Elm Funding Meeting. Then I wrote a short summary with only verbs and dates. Signed and filed it where dull things win. The binder waited like a patient drum for the next measured beat. Noon came and went like a courteous bus that does not honk. At 12:03, Kira texted, "Uploading now." At 12:27, "Server weird." At 12:51, "Owner at lunch." At 1:19, the messages turned to sparkles and a key emoji. I set my phone face down and let the fan keep the room's heartbeat steady. Reina sat across from me, scrolling county records with the unhurried patience of a librarian who knows which shelf wobbles. "Dovetail Management LLC," she said finally. "Formed 12 days ago. Registered agent is a mail drop service. P.O. box matches the one on your declined bank form. And the deed for the Elm Street building lists Edelman Family LLC as owner, not Dovetail." She looked up. "The barber has the mirror unit under a proper lease. The corner? No paperwork." I wrote the nouns, not the adjectives. At 2:06, I called the number on the deed. Mr. Adelman, voice like a dry handshake, confirmed he had no management company called Dovetail, no entity named Property Ops, and no intention of leasing the corner to a salon without permits that actually exist. "If someone is taking deposits," he said, "they're not taking them for me." Elder wisdom, when a room fills with fog. Open a window. Don't wave your arms. Go to the source document, the person who signs, the record that can't be charmed. Miss Pruitt's alert and Mr. Adelman's sentence were enough for a narrow request. Reina called the courthouse and found a same-day civil calendar for emergency protective orders regarding financial interference. "You're not accusing anyone of a crime," she said. "You're asking the court to keep your signature yours." We walked. Courthouse security felt like a metal-themed recital. My keys sang in the tray like a pocket wind chime. The guard grinned and said it was the nicest scale he'd heard all morning. 3 light jokes found their marks without tripping anyone. first. The elevator's ding landed on a note that made even the anxious look taller. Second. The hallway water fountain sputtered once like it had stage fright. Third. My phone set itself to do not disturb, as if it, too. Respected judges. Sidebar. Quirky fact. Federal judges in the United States don't actually use gavels in court. Most of those wooden taps belong to auctioneers or television. The real sound of a courtroom is paper being turned. Voices slowed down. And a stenographer's keys making chords that look like math. Department 3 had pews that remembered 1,000 sit-down truths. The clerk swore us in with the voice of someone who knows pace is mercy, under oath. I laid out the timeline like a clean tool roll, attempted addition of an authorized signer to my savings, declined by the credit union, letter of intent without a countersigned lease, a request to wire to property ops instead of a named landlord, city confirmation of no permits, deed confirmation of actual ownership, no adjectives, just dates and nouns. Academic phrase of the day, burden of proof. The public argument that the party making a claim must support it with evidence, not the listener with faith. Courts lend this idea a chair and ask everyone to sit. Kira arrived behind Evan, bracelet quiet, hair pulled back as if neatness could be proof. The judge, calm eyes, practiced stillness, invited her to respond. "We're building a business," she said. "Momentum matters. My friend runs property ops for Dovetail. The lease is in progress." "Name of the landlord of record?" the judge asked. "Dovetail Management," she said. "Individual's name?" Silence did what it does best. "We've been dealing with a team," she added. Raina handed up certified printouts, the LLC registration date, the mail drop address, the deed to Adelman Family LLC. The clerk dialed Mr. Adelman, who answered on speaker. "Do you have a management company called Dovetail?" the judge asked. "No, Your Honor." "Have you authorized anyone to collect a deposit for the corner unit?" "No." The room didn't shift. It simply rested in the new alignment. Kira's attorney, hired quickly or borrowed from a friend, suggested it was all an earnest mix-up. That entrepreneurial haste had outpaced infrastructure. Hanlon's razor made a quiet appearance in my head and took a seat. I didn't need malice when haste explained a lot. But the attempted bank form sat in evidence with my forged signature like a patient stone. Evan asked to speak, and the judge allowed one paragraph. "I believed we had a path," he said, voice steady and smaller. "I didn't know about the bank form. I didn't know about the P.O. box. I want my mother protected and our marriage honest." It wasn't eloquent. It was better. It was plain. The judge granted a narrow order. No one other than me may represent, modify, or attempt to access my financial accounts. No third-party wires based on letters of intent. Any future requests involving my funds must be in writing with counterpart names that can be verified by public record. "This is to keep family dinners possible," the judge said. "You can build a salon with receipts. You can't build one with promises tied to a mailbox." I kept one page of Martin's letter sealed in my bag, the part that named the coins and the laddered maturities. Leverage isn't always a thing you wield. Sometimes it's the choice to say less than you could, after the hearing. In the hallway where footsteps sound like punctuation, Kira turned to me. "I wanted to make something," she said. "I got ahead of the boring parts." "The boring parts," I answered, "are the building." Evan nodded, eyes on the floor tiles as if they had advice. Outside, the day had the hush relief of a library right after a fire drill. We stood in the shade of a slow tree. "I'm sorry, Mom," Evan said. "I should have checked the names." "We all should check the names," I said, and I meant all in the least dramatic way. "If you two still want a salon," I added. Bring me a lease with Mr. Adelman's signature and a permit number Hector can actually see. I'll show up with a wire and cupcakes. Until then, no envelopes move. On the walk home, my shoes made the soft kind of noise that sounds like agreement. I filed the order, scanned the stamped page, and slid a copy into the folder labeled Simple. The fan kept time, the coins slept where they were. And somewhere in town, a barber flipped a sign from closed to open. Proof that paperwork and hope can, in fact, shake hands. Morning slid in like a soft bookmark. I brewed coffee and let quiet set the table. The court's narrow order rested in my folder where dull victories live. The house felt half an inch taller. The way rooms do when you finally put the ladder away, I started with fences you can't see. I froze my credit at the 3 bureaus, added verbal passwords at the bank that only make sense to me, routed statements to a secure inbox, and set brokerage distributions to checking, never to any alias with a jaunty name. I closed 2 old store cards that existed mostly to collect dust and temptation. It wasn't drama, it was housekeeping with better nouns. I walked the yard while the world warmed. The rosemary kept its small hands to itself. The aloe stood like a politely armored guest. I sketched. Not a fortress, just a fence. Cedar pickets low enough to wave over. Strong enough to remind feelings they have doors. Lorna from next door saw me measuring with the tape draped round my neck like a hardware store necklace. Finally? She asked. Finally, I said. We set posts where the soil agreed and talked the way people do when they share a hammer and a past. Sawdust made polite confetti. Somewhere a wren auditioned for morning. Elder wisdom. Pick boundaries you can enforce on a tired Tuesday. Locks you'll relock. Rules you'll restate kindly. Routines you'll keep even when the casserole burns. Fancy resolves fail. Humble habits hold. Sidebar. Quirky fact, gardeners swear marigolds are tiny yellow bouncers for a vegetable bed. Folklore says they repel nematodes. The science is mixed. But the cheer is undeniable, and cheer works on pests you can't name. By noon, I had a short appointment at a modest used car lot with stickers that told the truth. No drama, I told the salesman. I had a car with charisma. I want one with manners. He grinned and handed me keys to a silver hatchback with more cup holders than opinions. The backup camera greeted me with a view of my own knees. The engine sounded like someone early to a meeting. Cloth seats, honest plastics, a trunk ready for potting soil or a stubborn chair. 3 light jokes arrived without knocking. The sales sheet offered an underbody ceramic unicorn add-on. I declined with gratitude. The lane assist beep scolded me for admiring clouds, and the radio tried to pair with my neighbor's speaker named Dad's Phone, which felt like a harmless haunting. On the drive home, the hatchback earned its name, Ernest. It did not pretend to know me, it simply delivered me. Which is all I wanted. I parked, signed the title with my dependable 4th grade signature, and slid the spare onto the hook where the BMW's key used to hang. My hand patted the air beside it the way you touch your hair after a haircut, half expecting what isn't there. Missing and regret are different rooms. Today, I let missing keep the softer lamp. Academic phrase of the day, commitment device. The public argument that we can protect our future selves by constraining options now. A fence around a yard. A funding plan with milestones. And a calendar reminder that says, sleep on it are small promises we make to tomorrow, so it doesn't have to wrestle tonight's impulses. Evan brought a paper bag of peaches that smelled like July, deciding to stay for dinner. He squinted down the line of new posts. Looks good, he said. Looks like a boundary, I answered, and let the word be neither accusation nor apology. We sat on the stoop and ate peaches over the yard, the juice committing small acts of gravity. I'm sorry, he said, without preface. I wanted momentum. I stopped asking names. I handed him a towel. Momentum is a fine engine, I said, but it stalls without nouns. He nodded, and the space between us arranged itself into something sturdier than relief. We wrote 2 agreements on index cards, small and dense with calm. First, monthly tea with no money talk, recipes, movies, things with bark and branches. Second, if a business plan needs my help, it travels with nouns, landlord of record, permit number, wire name that matches a W-9. He signed, I signed. We pinned the cards to the fridge under a magnet shaped like a lighthouse that has minded waves longer than either of us has been stubborn. He looked lighter, as if the magnet did more than hold paper. Kira texted a sentence that didn't dress itself up. I'm regrouping, I answered. When you have a lease with Mr. Adelman's signature and a permit receipt from Hector's desk, the cupcakes and the wire both exist. No lecture, no victory lap, just a door with hinges that swing and pins that stay. She replied with a single, okay, which is a small word that sometimes means the future has decided to breathe through the nose. In the afternoon, Lorna and I hung a simple gate. The latch clicked with the dignity of a period. We planted marigolds along the inside edge because folklore plus color is good policy. I tucked basil in a corner, started a compost pail, and set a bench where the late light drapes itself like a shawl. I measured one board twice because my father's ghost still believes in lumber mill arithmetic when the fence's shadow reached the rosemary. The yard looked outlined and calm, like a drawing that finally agreed with itself. I sent Raina a photo of the gate, not for her file, just because progress likes witnesses. She replied with a thumbs up and, unexpectedly, a recipe for a lemon cake that understands tea. Miss Pruitt emailed a final note. New password phrase set. Mail lock confirmed. Any change must see my face. The sentence wore no makeup and looked better for it. I saved everything in the simple folder, where dull things win. 3 more gentle jokes found places to sit. The password manager produced something that looked like a cat walked across my keyboard during jazz night. Ernest asked if we were already friends before pairing with my phone, and the marigolds turned their faces like small satellite dishes, eager for the sun's best program. I wrote a letter to myself and filed it with the passports and the tiny safe deposit key. If you read this on a day, the edges feel sharp. Water, something that forgives you. Plants are good at this. Walk the fence. Check the latches. Make a sandwich and salt it to the corners. Read Martin's map. The distances are still the distances. I could hear his soft throat clear before he'd say my name. The sound he made when he turned a wrench just enough and not a fraction more. Near dusk, I printed a 1-page note titled, What Moves and What Stays. What moves? Money only by plan, emotions through the yard like weather. Forgiveness on a leash that lengthens slowly. What stays? The court order, the habit of sleeping before deciding. Ernest's maintenance schedule. Tea appointments with my son. The promise that marigolds, even if they are only cheerleaders, will cheer every time the gate clicks. I taped the note inside the pantry door where future me tends to look when she forgets what steadiness eats. Lorna lifted a hand over the fence and offered a spare tomato. It's a volunteer, she said. Showed up where she didn't plant it. Most good things do, I said. We tucked it into a bare patch by the bench. I pressed the soil with the flat of my palm, the way you settle a thought you've decided to keep. By the time porch lights made their small stars, the house had the sound I love best. Fan, kettle, a page turning. I set the binder on the shelf and, beside it, a basket with garden gloves that will stain no matter how careful I am. Tomorrow might bring permits with names or another letter of intent dressed as a lease. Either way, I know where the gate is and which side to stand on while I decide who to let in. Blue evening gathered like a soft cardigan, and the fence cast a friendly line across the yard.
I set out folding chairs that still remembered birthdays and graduations, a tray of lemon cake from Reina's recipe, and a stack of index cards for names, dates, and crops. Lorna arrived with a trowel and the kind of grin that means a project is becoming a place. 2 teenagers from down the block lugged a bag of soil like they were auditioning for a sensible gym. We called it the block garden because naming things is how people stay.
Evan came carrying a box of seed packets and the paper he'd promised, copies of our 2 fridge agreements, signed again in fresh ink as if the week had taught him steadier cursive. Kira followed, hair in a plain knot, bracelet gone. She held a single folder with both hands the way you carry a breakable truth. I regrouped, she said without flourish. No P.O. boxes, no management company invented last week. I'm starting with a booth rental at Adelman's permitted salon, unit number, license, and W9 attached. If this works for 6 months, I'll revisit a full lease with him. She passed me the papers. Names match names. Numbers introduce themselves politely. I'm asking only for equipment, she added. Chairs, sanitation, the boring things you like. Elder wisdom, when trust takes a bruise. Let the next ask be smaller than the apology and anchored to something the calendar can prove. The fastest way back to belonging is a handful of kept promises, all dated. I read, nodded, and pointed to the envelope that had weighted like a stone with good posture. First tranche upon countersigned booth agreement, I said. Second after your first month's rent clears and your insurance certificate lists the right address. She exhaled like a person who'd finally found the door instead of a diagram of a door. Evan squeezed her shoulder, not to steer her, only to say, here we are. Academic phrase of the day, procedural justice, the public argument that when the steps feel fair, clear rules. Consistent treatment, reasons given. People accept outcomes more peacefully, even if those outcomes don't grant them everything they hoped for. Paper, done kindly, is a form of respect. We shifted from money to marigolds. Lorna handed Kira a flat of the cheerful little bouncers. Folklore says they scare off the tiny troublemakers, she said. Science says it depends. We planted them anyway because cheer is a treatment plan too. Sidebar. Quirky fact, an active compost pile can run hot enough, 130 to 160 degrees, that on cool mornings it makes its own weather. Steam rises like the heap is practicing to be a tiny volcano with excellent table manners. 3 light jokes scattered like seeds and did not ask for applause. First, the sign-up sheet multiplied on the copier like it had dreams of becoming a novel. We told it to stick to nonfiction, and it behaved. Second, the new hatchback, Ernest, chirped when I set a bag of potting mix on the passenger seat, as if warning me not to try buckling the soil in without consent. Third, the gate latch clicked with such satisfaction that everyone kept checking it for the joy of a sentence ending properly. We drew the beds with string and common sense. Lorna called squares. The teenagers measured inches like they were counting down to a song. I put basil in the corner where late light collects and tucked the volunteer tomato near the bench like a guest of honor. Evan installed a simple tool rack, then stepped back and looked at nothing in particular. I keep thinking about names, he said. All the nouns we skipped. We'll learn to ask them earlier, I answered. And we'll forgive ourselves on the days we forget. Kira knelt by the rosemary and pressed the soil with the flat of her palm, the way you steady a newborn thought. I'm sorry, she said. Not to the plant, not entirely to me, but to the space that now had a fence and therefore room for remorse without sprawl. Thank you for not making a scene. Procedures did the heavy lifting, I said. We just carried the copies.
We broke for cake and quiet. Reina texted me a photo of a proof of insurance sample with a check mark where Kira's would need to be. Miss Pruitt emailed all quiet, a small sentence that felt like a chair saved for me in a crowded room. Mr. Adelman's office replied with a scanned, countersigned booth agreement before the kettle finished its little aria. Names matched. Dates stood upright,
I set the wire for the equipment tranche, labeled it the way future me prefers, Kira Booth Tranche 1 date, and printed the confirmation for the simple folder. Kira watched the page appear with a look I recognized from my early teacher years, the gaze you give a stack of graded essays when you know you didn't cut corners. "I'll bring you my first rent receipt," she said. "Bring cupcakes too," I said, and the house softened around the line. As dusk slid deeper, our small garden began to look like a map you could actually drive. The marigolds held their sunset like a promise. The rosemary kept the air civil. Ernest waited at the curb without complaint, a car with work ethic and no vanity. I ran a hose in a slow arc that made rainbows the children pretended not to chase. Evan checked the latch one more time, purely for the punctuation. We ended with a circle, not a meeting, only a pause. I read a paragraph from Martin's letter, just the part where he blesses the boring. Leave the bank with lists. Not treasure. Sleep before deciding. Love the people. Interrogate the paper. We let silence do the rest. The teenagers pocketed seed packets like fortunes. Lorna took the leftover cake to an older neighbor who waters her sidewalk so it won't feel left out when it rains. When the porch lights clicked on up and down the street, we gathered the tools, washed hands until the water ran clear, and let the yard learn its new job. I walked Evan and Kira to the gate. "Tomorrow," Kira said, tapping the folder with the counter signature. "Tomorrow," I agreed, which is a word that can be a fence or a bridge, depending on where you place it. Tonight, it was both, boundary and passage, hinge and pin, click and open. Night arrives like a kind librarian, dimming the lamps one by one, and the rooms loosen their shoulders as the air grows cooler, and the paper on the table finally lies flat. A week that began with a sale and a soft egg closes with small, workable promises, names written clearly, dates that do not wobble, and a gate that remembers how to close without slamming. The car with charisma has rolled into someone else's life, and in its quiet parking space stands a hatchback with manners and a calendar that knows when to show up. The tin in the glove box has done its work, not to dazzle, but to steady. The vault has kept its temperature. The coins are sleeping again, their polite shine unneeded for now. In the yard, square beds hold their measured breath. Marigolds throwing a little gold into the evening. Rosemary keeping the edges honest. Basil deciding where to lean. A son who wanted momentum finds comfort in nouns, and a daughter-in-law who reached too fast learns to love the door that opens slowly. And the sound of the latch becomes its own kind of prayer. Paperwork is no longer an argument. It is a way of treating each other well, a rhythm for families who want both kindness and proof. And in the kitchen, beside the simple folder, a note waits for the mornings when courage forgets itself. Sleep first. Water something. Salt the toast all the way to the corners, so the house exhales. The fan hums a patient syllable, and the night gathers close without hurry, because the distances are still the distances, and the path, for once, is content to be ordinary and good.